Hello and welcome to Produced By. Just quickly before we begin, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting it by joining our Patreon. You can choose from a list of memberships and will receive some exciting rewards. Thank you, and back to the episode. Hello Megan, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So Megan, can you please introduce yourself?
So I'm Megan. I'm from Essex. I live just outside London, and I am a freelance writer, specifically with true crime genre.
So can you maybe tell us more about your background? Where do you come from?
So I've always my mum is like a massive true crime fan, so it's always I've always sort of known about it. I've always known about cases and stuff, but I never really took an interest in it as such. And I have ADHD, so I wasn't diagnosed until my sort of mid-20s. So I couldn't really stick with a hobby, or I couldn't really maintain a job. So I couldn't really find something that would interest me. And then along came true crime, and I was just like, wow, these are really awful. What makes someone do such awful things? And from that moment, I wanted to start exploring. And there's so many cases, and there's even cases today that I've not really read. So it sort of kept my attention for a good 9 years. And then I sort of progressed into uni, and now it's a job. So it's been a sort of long journey, but it's one that has kept me interested to see why people do what they do, but also, respect the victims and look into the victims and stuff like that.
So, how, out of curiosity, how old were you when you got interested in such stuff?
So I was 24 when I got diagnosed, just before I started university. And it finally started to make sense, why I couldn't keep interests, why I couldn't really hold a job for too long. So it eventually made things a little bit easier, and then I sort of adapted sort of my life, and just kept things up I did enjoy. I sort of focused on those heavily and try and see what I could do with that. So obviously with the crime, I knew that's something that I really enjoyed. Wasn't too sure how to make it into a career, but I knew, that you could study sort of similar stuff at university. So then I decided to go to university. And so I sort of adapted my way of thinking, which really helped me sort of understand the way I am. I didn't want to stress too much because it's not my fault. So I just try and keep things that I enjoy, keep things that I know I'm good at, and sort of focus on those.
Yeah. And what about before? Before 24, you weren't interested in it, or it, didn't really grab your attention?
Yeah, I mean, it's not. I guess I just didn't really look at true crime before as something that I would be interested in. I guess it's quite a niche topic, isn't it? It's not something that is sort of out there like playing football or films and sort of liking films and stuff. So it was very different. And obviously, way back then, it didn't have the sort of true crime didn't have the following as it does today. With all the documentaries and all the books. So maybe it probably would have grabbed my attention a little bit earlier if it was more common. But I'm kind of happy with how things have gone.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, as you mentioned, it's a niche topic, but I feel like that lately or recently there's been such a big hype about it. Even if I check some podcasts, there are so many crime-related podcasts, even shows on Netflix. So it seems like there is a huge interest about this topic.
Yeah, there's a huge interest. I mean, there's so many talented podcasts, like podcast producers. There's so many talented writers and an amazing array of documentaries now covering not just sort of like violent crimes, but things like con artists and sort of things like that, especially on Netflix at the moment. So like the Tinder swindler and things like that. So it's become such a broad thing, and I think it's just because I think we are interested it's not so much that people are interested in the gruesomeness, it's more the fact of why someone would do that. why are people like
Hmm.
this? Because these events are quite rare. So it's like, it's just the why. And I think that's what draws people in. And it's interesting because it is mainly women that do enjoy watching these sort of things. And bizarrely, women are more
Hmm.
likely, to be the target of some of these people that we see on Netflix and Discovery Plus and all of that. So it's very interesting, the psychology behind it all.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And before we discuss it in more detail, how did you how did you actually study it? Once you got interested in it, did you study it at university?
Um, I don't really. I mean, I can't remember. It's about a good 9 years ago. I think I was just reading and I came across a case, a Canadian case, the Ken and Barbie killers. It was a shocking, shocking crime. And from that moment on, I was just like, these people are awful. Why would these people do such vile things? And then I started reading into it more, and I realized there's a whole load of information out there, whether it's books or documentaries or articles, and I just got hooked into reading it all. And then that from there, I just wanted to read more cases, so I read similar cases, and it sort of expanded, sort of female killers and killer couples, and there was just a whole load to read on. And there's just so much. It's scary to think how many people are killed every sort of day around the world. Obviously America um, has a large amount of murders and stuff. But when you look outside of the States and sort of the countries like the UK, where we get a lot of information from, sort of countries like Canada, Australia, parts of Asia, Russia, like there's so much more, like especially serial killers and things like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree. And sometimes, I mean, I don't read it as much, but when I read something, it often's completely unbelievable to me. It's something I would never expect, and just crazy, you know.
No, I was just saying that when you read, it's like, especially if you're not really aware of true crime, it's not really something that interests you, and you just come across a page and you read a case, it's absolutely shocking a lot of the time, that just how people can be so evil, so cruel.
Hmm. Yeah. No, I was just before gonna ask you that when you studied a master's, what was it then? I thought it was some related subject to develop yourself in this area, or it wasn't?
So I did my master's. My master's sort of followed on. So I did my undergrad. Went to Canterbury. I did my undergrad in criminology, and I graduated 2021. And then the following year, I did my master's in Middlesex. I did criminology, but this time I did it with forensic psychology, because I always found the forensic
Mhm.
psychology side quite interesting. So when I was in Canterbury, a lot of the modules that I'd pick would always be more the psychology based side of criminology. So I went to study it at Middlesex, and it was really interesting. I learned a lot more, a lot of additional things. It's a shame because your period as a master's student is so small. I mean, I was only there from
Mhm.
September to April, so you don't have the same length of
Yeah.
time as an undergrad. But it was a brilliant experience. I met some amazing people, learned a lot. It did help me boost my skills for what I currently do today. So what I did when I did
Mhm.
start to sort of find my interest in true crime, I would always write little documents, Word documents about all the cases I've read. I'd write up, but my writing wasn't bad. It was new. I didn't really write since I was at school, so there was a big period that I wasn't writing. Whereas obviously going to university, I developed the writing, the research side as well. So yeah, uni was just an all round brilliant experience.
Mhm. And can you maybe introduce a bit more the content of such a course? Because as someone coming from a course, artist related from film, I have no idea what we're maybe learning there. I'm very curious.
Yeah, so my undergrad and my masters were a little bit different, similar sort of field. So criminology is really the study of crime. So when I was in Canterbury studying, the modules were quite varied. You had aspects of policing, you had aspects of psychology, you had aspects of law. There was all different sort of criminology is so broad. And then when I did my masters, Obviously, it was mainly focused on forensic psychology. So there was a few elements, sort of learning about the theories of criminology, a few of the sort of basic things you would do, but it's mainly more the psychology side. So you were learning about why people do what they do, sort of things like the way it is in court. So there's what I loved about my course is there was such a broad aspect to everything. Criminology is one of those subjects where I think people get a little bit confused. I think people think criminology itself is the study of serial killers. It's not criminology. There's elements, but it's so broad. It covers everything. If you want to sort of study things like the criminal mind, forensic psychology is the one. But criminology gives you that nice boundary, so you can sort of see every different aspect.
Yeah, yeah. I'm trying to make sense of it as well because as I said, don't know anything about it. And for example, when you say word forensic, can you explain the word more? What does it mean? For example, forensic psychology.
So forensic psychologist is the sense of it in court. So forensic psychology is essentially, I'm trying to work out how I can word this. So obviously when you study psychology, I believe, I didn't study psychology myself, but I think it's the study of the brain in general. So it's a very broad aspect. So you're studying, it's not just mental health, you're studying how the brain works, etc. But I think with forensic psychology, you're mainly studying it from a criminal perspective. So with my modules, it was mainly focused what I was studying at university was mainly from a criminal perspective. So it wasn't so deep as a psychology course itself. I mean, you learn the basics. So you learn about mental illness, you learn about things like that. But yeah, it's mainly in a violent offender. So I think one of my modules I studied was like mental illness in criminal offending, which was really interesting. So that they're the sort of things that you learn in forensic psychology, and it's really interesting. I know a lot of women are interested, and I've been talking to an American podcaster at the moment. She's a forensic psychologist, and she's brilliant at what she does. And she's always talking about wanting to get more women into studying forensic psychology because so many women are fascinated by it. So it would be nice to see more women in such a role.
Yeah, and why do you think it's so that it's maybe more for men than women?
I think
why
there are
more
obviously
men sign up?
yeah, there are a lot of women and men that do forensic psychology, but I think at the moment when you look at the type of people that are interested into why people do what they do, it is mainly women. And I think a lot of women, when I was talking to this podcaster, she was saying she gets a lot of messages about women wanting to know how you get into it, how you become a forensic psychologist, and it would just be nice to see more women in sort of in the sciences. I mean, obviously we talk about women in sort of the STEM sciences, sort of like your physical ones, but for the social sciences as well. It would be nice to see more women, because women are so interested in stuff, and I don't know if it's whether maybe I know a lot of people sort of in the UK, university, people obviously with the fees and things like that, and how much time it's you're at uni 4 times a week. So I know there's that a little bit of worry, but it would be nice to sort of explain that more and be like, it's a brilliant thing to study.
Yeah, I agree. From my knowledge, don't know anyone who would be studying that, so it's probably a good point that there is a lack of people interested in studying this course. And coming back to the course, what were, for example, some projects that you did in that course, both either undergraduate or postgraduate?
Yeah, I did some brilliant projects. I mean, for me, my third year was in the COVID lockdown period. So obviously I had to do a lot of things online, which was very interesting approach, especially if you're not used to it. But I think my favourite projects were my dissertation, because obviously I could pick them. I could pick my topic. I was always quite lucky. I managed to sort of do essays and things around like what I was into. You know, a lot of the questions were very similar to things I knew about. But when I was doing my dissertation, I got to pick. So my dissertation as an undergrad was it was about school shooters, and you know
Mm-hmm.
why. And I looked at the elements of mental illness, bullying, and violent media. And you know, I actually got feedback and feedback. Like I think I got a second class for it, and feedback I got was, you know, you did so much. You know, one of those elements in itself could have been a dissertation just looking at mental illness, but I took on three different things, and that was probably my favourite to do. Yeah, I think that was like 10,000 words. So I really enjoyed that project.
Mm-hmm.
And then the same with my masters. I think obviously it was 15,000 words this time, and I think I'd studied serial killers' childhoods and linking them to different theories in psychology, and you know, trying to explain them that way, which was really interesting,
Mm-hmm.
really in depth. I mean, I always had a head
Yeah.
start. I love writing, so I always sort of started my dissertation way before I needed to. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it was. I think my dissertations were my favorite highlight. I think because I really got to show
Really, yeah.
my interest. Because obviously, criminology and forensic, through my experience, were very they were very essay based or sort of essay based type
Mm-hmm.
courses. So a lot of the questions were chosen, and they were good questions. I enjoyed them, but they weren't what I could pick. So at least with my dissertation, I got that sort of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And also, as we spoke before about how many people study these courses, can you say, for example, how many people were in your class? If it was how much, just to get an idea how popular it was?
Well, my criminology as an undergrad, that was really popular. I mean, there was times when the halls, the lecture halls were heaving with people, and they had to sort of get bigger
Really?
ones. So that was as an undergrad, and I don't know if that was because criminology was quite broad. So I'm not too sure, but you were talking a fair hundred or so. It was very busy. Um, with my masters,
It's a
it was
lot. I
much
didn't expect
smaller.
that.
Yeah, the criminology course was huge. That was very big. And then my masters, it was much smaller. I think just the criminology with forensic group, I think, you know, I'm looking at maybe about 20 to 30. It was a very
Mhm.
small class.
I was just going to say, what are some examples that people who go to study such a course, what are the positions that they want to work in afterwards?
Oh, there's
Would
such
that
a
be?
wide range. I mean, obviously, if you want to do forensic psychology, you'd obviously have to go on and do a PhD to become, you know, a psychologist, doctor. But you know, if you didn't want to take that route, there is, you know, you could work, you know, policing. Um, you can work sort of
Mhm.
like social services. You can work in. There's just a wide range. You know, you can. There's I can't remember, there's quite a few. There's a whole list. So anything with criminology based, teaching is
Yeah.
obviously then go and do another thing. But yeah, there's it's so broad. I mean, I was actually surprised when I was looking at more so the criminology side, how many different industries you can work in with a criminology degree. I thought originally it was just sort of mainly that sort of field, but it was more. It was quite spread out because I think it's a lot of the skills that you learn are transferable. Um, so
Mhm.
it is very broad. You know, it's not just for people that, you know, you don't have to go if you want to be a doctor. You can sort of study loads of other things, and it could, you know, you don't even have to necessarily go on and do a master's in it. You know, you could. It gives you the skills, the research, the writing, and the
Mhm.
scientific side as well to do anything. You're really quite lucky with a course like criminology.
Yeah. And as we discussed before, maybe even like a filmmaker can study that to have knowledge to make these films with the recent boom in these type of films and documentaries on Netflix.
Yeah, I mean, having it just gives you that extra sort of knowledge level as well. Like, you know, being able to sort of understand criminology and understanding sort of people's criminal mindsets, or whether you focused on the law aspect or whether you focused on the policing, it just gives you so many different skills that you can really transfer to whatever you want, obviously within reason.
Mm-hmm. So, did you know what you wanted to do afterwards, once you graduate, while
I
studying?
mean, yeah, I mean, for me, I actually found the sort of transition, if I'm honest, I found it quite difficult. I did 5 years at university, so the foundation year, and then I did my 3 years as an undergrad,
Mm-hmm.
and then my extra year. So I had sort of like a structure, I had a routine, I had, deadlines. And then when I left in 2022 after I graduated from my master's, it was a big change. I didn't have that, and it was quite difficult, especially with someone like me. It was like, what do I do? And I sort of toyed with the idea of doing a PhD. I was thinking, at the beginning of 2023, I wrote a proposal. I reached out to universities, but then I realised, my writing style that I'm comfortable with and the things that I'm interested in, it was quite difficult for me to sort of get someone on board. So I kind of came to the realization that, my sort of education sort of ends at master's level, which I'm happy with. I've got 2 good degrees. I had a brilliant time at university. So I did find the transition quite difficult. I wasn't too sure, I got a couple of good degrees, but I didn't really know what I could do with them. And I had a lot of knowledge about true crime, and I was sort of at a bit of a confusion, but I didn't know what to do, what to reuse. And I think, as the months passed, I was doing some regular chores, sort of like May, June of last year, and I got a message on my Instagram. I run a little true crime blog. I always talk about different cases, and I got a message saying, "Hey,
Mm-hmm.
we from a really good podcaster, UK-based podcaster," and I was like, they went to me. They were like, we've seen your work for a little while, would you like to write a script for us? And I was like, wow, this is an amazing
Oh,
opportunity. And from that moment,
yeah.
I've written 1 or 2 scripts each month for them. And then I was like, okay, this is really interesting. I really like doing this. It gave me a chance to show my skills. I'm writing in a different manner. So obviously I've gone from writing more academically to writing more like not like a story, but more, sort of have to explain everything sort of in detail, from the start to the end. So I really enjoyed it. And then I think from then, I sort of was like, okay, let's reach out. My girlfriend's really, really supportive. So she was like, why don't you reach out to other people? So I sent a few emails out, and I emailed a sort of like a broadcasting company that have a website. And they were like, would you like to write an article for us? That was in the summer last year as well. And I wrote an article and it did well. And again, ever since then, I've had maybe 1 or 2 articles a month, depending. And then
Mm.
I think the end of last year, I got asked to do a bit of research for another UK-based podcaster. So it's sort of kind of built up from there really. And I think I've actually got, I think I'm doing a guest appearance on a podcast tomorrow, with an American podcaster
Oh,
about,
wow.
talking, just
Busy
chatting,
schedule.
just a little casual chat
Mm-hmm.
about sort of crimes. And so I'm hoping sort of it can sort of keep growing really.
So it sounds like, when are you going to start your own podcast?
Yeah, do you know what? I have been asked a few times, and sort of now there's so many talented podcasters out there doing amazing things with true crime. It would, I guess, I know it, I'm not sure how I'd write it, but there's so many talented people. I'm happy to leave the true crime to them, like the physical performances and talking about it. I'm happy to be the writer. I enjoy writing. I think I'd be a little bit more confident. I'm a little bit more confident with the writing side, and it gives me the chance to do lots of research.
Yeah, yeah.
The more confident people can do the podcast.
Yeah. And can you name those podcasts or companies you worked with, if you can say it
Yes.
publicly?
So I've worked for UK True Crime. I've done, obviously, ever since May, June time, I've written the script for those. They're absolutely brilliant. They cover all sorts of crimes and cases that are British based. The articles
Mm-hmm.
I've written are for the crime and investigation. So they're a channel. They broadcast loads of different crime documentaries, but they also have a website and they have lots of different articles about crime. So I've written a few varied ones. I've written things about, from serial killers to sort of single murders, to sort of like mass, I think some crimes going on in South Korea, some sort of mass stabbing type crimes. So I've written a different array of different ones. And I've written some research for British murders, just a bit of research for their Patreon exclusive episodes. I think, I'm sort of growing from there, really.
And can you introduce us a bit more the process, what it works like if they want to work with you? How do you, start researching, writing?
So my process for how I approach my work, when I get, I always put forward ideas. So I'm, especially for the UK True Crime podcast, I'm like, here's a few cases that I've read on recently. And then, they would respond back and be like, okay, we like this one. And then what I would do is I would look through all the articles. I would scour articles, see what I can find. It's important to get sort of the background of victim, what they were like. The same with the killer, the perpetrator as well. So I usually do bullet points. So I start off with the childhoods and then go into sort of the backgrounds leading up to the murders, to the crimes. So yeah, I would look through sort of Google, do a standard Google search first, just to get to read more into it. And then I would look through books. So I would go on books. I've got a massive true crime magazine pile in my bedroom. So I would look through all magazines in case there's anything read in there. I would then check documentaries, watch a few of those if there is any. And I'll just make notes, little bullet points in order. And then when I've got all my bullet points, I want to start to make paragraphs out of them. So because I'm so hyper focused on writing, I can usually turn around about a 3,000 word piece in about 3 days.
True.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say it sounds time consuming.
Yeah,
I didn't expect that.
Yeah, it can be. I mean, it takes up most of my mornings, but I love doing it. I love being able to write. So, I could spend all day writing the script and I'll be really happy doing my research, typing away. But yeah, I do like to schedule it so I don't do it all in one day. So I like to maybe take a couple of mornings to do it. And obviously then I've got the process of rereading it, running it through like a spell check, Grammarly, that sort of thing, and then referencing. My referencing has always been, I've always been one of those people that don't reference properly, in the sense of I don't put the reference, so then I have to spend hours trying to find where I found this article. So yeah, so I do my referencing last. So it's a long process, but it's really enjoyable. It's really worth it. And anyone that loves true crime and loves writing, they would love doing it.
Yeah. Have you got a maybe still favorite podcast or something that you would like to work with?
Yeah, I mean, one of my goals is I'd love to be able to spread out more. I love to be able to write for more people. There's so many good podcasts out there. Morbidology is really good. They cover so many different cases. The Killer Psychologist is just started. That's a really good podcast, talking about her life as a forensic psychologist. And that's really interesting one. Obviously, UK True Crime and British Murders, really good. There's so many good ones out there, and they all cover different things. So you've got ones that are dedicated to British murders and crimes in the UK, ones that are sort of explaining the life from their perspective as a psychologist, and then obviously American-based crimes. There's so many. There's so many to research and look into.
Yeah. So if someone is listening, make sure to reach out.
Yeah, definitely. I hit up my Instagram. I can always recommend some amazing documentaries to watch. Some really good podcasters, talented podcasters to listen to.
And you have a quite active presence on Instagram, right? Do you post something every day?
Yeah. So when I was doing my masters, because I used to get the train in. It wasn't a long journey, but I used to commute in. I was like, I want to have a blog, write all my knowledge about true crime, because masters isn't, it is intense, but compared to life as an undergrad, I wasn't doing as many days in uni, and obviously it was still sort of post COVID, so one day was at home as well. So I had the time to sort of run a little blog, and I just sort of grew it from there, talking about all different cases, not just sort of murder cases, disappearances as well. So I've been looking forward to sort of growing that, and I think I've got about 800, nearly 900 followers now, which I'm excited about. That's where I've been, messaged for scripts and stuff. So I do love my little Instagram account, sort of kind of promoting my work, but also sort of, especially with the missing cases, to bring sort of attention to those and unsolved murders too.
If you want to boost your online presence, check out our digital marketing agency called Trailblazed. You can also enroll in our Skillshare course called The 10 Tips on How to Succeed in Your Creative Career, which was inspired by the podcast. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our weekly newsletter called Creative Spotlight to stay up to date with the show and more. Links are in the show notes. Thanks. And what's the name of your Instagram account?
So my name on my Instagram is Megatha Christie. It came about because obviously my name is Megan. My name is Megan, and it actually started, there was this book, I can't remember what it was called, but a couple of years ago there was this little book, and it was a competition, and I think if you won you got about 200 quid, and what it was I can't remember the name, I wish I remembered it, but you had all these different pages, different paragraphs, but they weren't in order, and you've got to work out where these paragraphs belong, and all these paragraphs are related to different characters, so you've got to find these different characters and then find what pages links the characters, and then also put it all together as a book where it belongs. And I tried to do it, didn't do it, and I used to call myself like Megatha Christie because it was kind of like a detective thing and clashed with my name. And from that moment, I was like, you know what? That would be a brilliant name for my. I think my original name was just like true crime. I can't remember what it was called now, but it was just something sort of standard, like a standard true crime name. But now when I started doing this book, I was like, okay, this is a brilliant name. This is going to have to be my sort of blog name. So I've just kept it since from there.
Yeah, I agree. I like it as well, and it helps you to stand out. So it's not, nothing wrong with it, but not like a general crime, true crime or something like that. Yeah. And do you run a blog as well?
A blog. So that's my main sort of blog. That's the main one that I have.
The Instagram.
I find it easier for me just to have. I have it on Facebook too, but I find it easier just to sort of maintain the Instagram side of things. Instagram, I feel, is a little bit more popular than maybe other social medias now. So I find that one the most easier to use and to sort of navigate as well. So that's why I mainly use that one.
And is this working for the podcast or writing articles basically your job now, or is there something else you do, or do you write for someone else as well?
So writing the sort of articles and the scripts is what I do. I enjoy, going out, asking people, messaging people, whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Instagram, messaging people, whether they like a script writer or, reaching out all over the place. And it's got me some really good results so far. I enjoy it. It means that I can dedicate all my time to writing, put all 100% into my work, which I really enjoy. There's been times, I think, especially in last summer when I was doing I had a couple of articles and scripts on the go, and it was like go. Like, it was amazing to be able to have, because I quite like that. I love that at uni, you had the deadlines and you were writing essentially for someone. Obviously my blog is my hobby. I enjoy that in my personal time, but being able to write for someone else and to have the deadlines, I love that structure, and especially as it's something that I enjoy doing. So yeah, I love to put all the effort into my work to make it, as
Yeah,
good as I can, and hopefully attract other people into, wanting me to write for them.
yeah. And what do you do if that happens when you, lose your creativity or when you don't know how to continue? Because it sounds to me like it needs to be hard to keep writing all the time. So what do you do if
Yeah,
you encounter such moments?
obviously being a freelance writer, there are times where, I could maybe have a couple of weeks without a project to do. And, for me, it's not about the money, it's about the enjoyment. So if I have a couple of weeks without any
Mm.
projects, I sort of like, oh, like I've got no writing. I love writing, writing's my whole life. So I do sort of have that little moment. But then I realize, that as a freelancer, you've got to build, and it happens, and it's okay. And I find other things to keep me going. So I keep looking at true crime stuff. I have my little blog, so I keep the writing going, which actually helps. Having the blog on the side helps my creativity, because I know I update that every single day. So I know that if there's maybe a week
Mhm.
or so I don't have a script or an article to write, I've got my blog, which I have to keep. I keep doing. I keep updating, and so it keeps my sort of creativity flowing. It keeps my, obviously my interest is there. So that's how I sort of fill those periods where I might not have uh, an article to write.
Mhm. And talking about the audience or the followers on Instagram, have you checked if it's, what's the demographics? If it's also the more women than men, or what are the ages?
It was interesting. I think obviously I have the same sort of account on Facebook, and Facebook actually you can break down and you can see, and it did actually come up. I was looking at sort of the demographics, and it did actually say a lot more women, which I'm not surprised, because women are the sort of bigger consumers of true crime content. But it is really interesting. I think obviously I do sort of interact with a lot of my followers on Instagram. It's a lot of those are women, talking about sort of, oh my god, I remember this case. This case is awful. So obviously I always like to interact, and from my followers I actually get new cases that I've never heard of before. So I find the interaction, especially in the true crime community, really important to be able to read more into cases that I've not heard of before.
Yeah, and with such a big interest in this type of content, is there also a lot of people who are actually writing it, such as for you competition of other writers, or what is it
Yeah,
like from this point of
yeah,
view?
obviously it's such a sort of hot topic now. So many, like I said, documentaries and podcasts out there, and there's loads of amazing, talented writers. And it might be a little bit, I wouldn't necessarily say it's harder to be seen. I think it might take a little bit longer because there's so many talented people, but I don't really see it as competition. I just see it as
Mm.
I look at it in the way of like, these other people are amazing writers. I can maybe learn something, or I can maybe communicate and reach out and learn more cases maybe that they've covered, listen to them more. So I wouldn't see them as competition. I wouldn't see them as, as a negative thing. I just see it as someone that I maybe
Mhm.
could look up to, maybe I could reach out to, because, obviously freelance writing, it is competitive. It's very competitive, not just with people that are interested in true crime, but then you've got on the other end of it, you've got journalists in general with journalist degrees, which I don't have. I just see it as, yeah, I don't see it as competition. I just see them as, I'm learning something. We're all equally talented. We all have the same interests.
Mhm.
We can all work together.
Yeah, I think that's the right mindset. And who's your maybe people that inspire you, or some writers in that area that you like to follow, or that you like their
Yeah, so I
work?
think I've read a lot of books. So obviously one of my big inspirations is Aphrodite Jones. She's an American, she's written so many brilliant true crime books. I watch Aphrodite Jones crime documentaries, absolutely brilliant the way she covers them. Um, And then I'm also, a really big fan of Morbidology. They do absolutely amazing, sort of interesting cases. I've been reading some of their cases, listening to their podcast, because I'm like, wow, I've never heard of this before. So there's loads of different people that I look up to and be like, wow, they're so successful. You know, they're amazing at what they do. You can see their passion, their interest. You know, how they advocate for the victims as well. You know, always making sure the victims are remembered, which is the most important thing in true crime. You know, we see with the documentaries. You know, sometimes these sort of, not so much documentaries, but more of the Netflix dramas and things like that, we do see maybe more focus and sensationalism of the killer themselves, and little sort of focus on the victims. So, you know, so many podcasts and writers and TV presenters, not like, you know, true crime documentary hosts and stuff, they always make sure that the victim is remembered, which is the most important thing.
Yeah. And this may be a silly question, but does that happen, or how often does that happen that there is a crime that you didn't know about? Because I'm sure you must know so much.
So many times. I'm just writing a little blog entry I was looking through cases what I could write for my blog this week, and I found one sort of like a basketball sort of a murder in high school, and I was like, oh my god, I've never heard this one before. And the amount of times I've looked, and I like to focus on the crimes I haven't heard of before, because I like to think that maybe my audience, my followers, also haven't heard of those. So I like to be able to sort of reach out that different aspect as well. So yeah, a lot of the time I'm like, geez, I've not heard of this before. Have to read into it, have to write about it, have to put it in my book. So yeah, but I like that, and that's the thing with true crime, is that so many of these cases are sadly happening every single day, that around the world, that there's always a case that you probably haven't heard of before or haven't written about.
Yeah. I mean, I cannot imagine what it must feel like to have knowledge like you do of all this terrible stuff that has been happening.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the balance of finding other things. So for me, you know, before true crime writing was my job, you know, my hobby was to sort of watch documentaries, write my blog. But now obviously it is my job. You know, you're reading a lot of horrific things, you know, awful crimes that have happened. And, you know, so what I do now is I dedicate my mornings. So if I've got an article or so to write, you know, I would have a true crime documentary on, I'd write my article and I'd do my blog at the same time. So then when that's finished, the true crime TV goes off, the laptop shuts, and then I do my other hobby, which is Lego. So like I sort of wind down.
What is it?
That I do some Lego, building Lego. It's so therapeutic.
Nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so therapeutic, and it's a really it sort of still has that creative edge to it. So it's sort of true crime free. It's sort of a wind down time, and it's sort of something a little bit different, but still get creative and still gets your brain going. So it's sort of finding that balance.
So it actually helps you to switch off, and you are able not to think about it. Oh yeah, that's smart. That's something I was really curious about. And for example, does it influence you when you go outside in the evening and you are more scared, or the opposite, that you are not scared, or it doesn't influence you at all?
Oh, 100%. It definitely makes you a little bit more wary. It definitely makes you obviously not. I don't live in fear of these crimes. You know, things like serial killings are rare. But obviously it does make you think twice about going out. And that's the crazy thing, because obviously, you know, we as women, we are quite scared of going out in the dark, but we consume so much true crime content. It is very interesting. But yeah, it definitely does sort of make you more wary. So in some ways, the positive side of true crime content is it does make you more aware, which is a good thing. But yeah, it definitely does sort of play in your mind a bit, like, oh, okay, I'm probably not going to like walk down here, or probably going to, you know, the thing is as well with sort of, especially when you sort of study serial killers, you know, these people, you know, they can blend in, you know, they're not sort of scary looking like you see in the horror film. So these people will generally blend in. So it's all about, so you're probably not going to know, but the thing is yeah, it definitely does make you more aware. And I think that's one of the things, you know, horror films and stuff, they've sort of given we've sort of gone past this now with our interest in true crime has grown as society. But horror films have always sort of depicted like sort of serial killers as sort of strange looking, acting in a certain way, but in reality, that's the case. You look at, for example, people like Ted Bundy, who was very popular. You wouldn't look at him and think, he's an absolute monster. He's an evil man. You would, he's someone you'd pass on the street and you wouldn't even notice. So obviously,
Yeah.
in a way, the true crime way has shown us sort of, we are even more cautious. I don't know if that's a negative thing, because as women, we are generally, more scared of going out in the dark. So I don't necessarily know if it's made it any sort of harder for us, but I think it's definitely made us more aware.
Yes. Yeah, I was gonna say the same, that quite often when I read about something or even watched film or documentary, the person looked completely normal, and you would never expect such a person to do something like that. And that's what makes it scary. That's something unexpected, and then you find out.
Yeah, that's a totally normal reaction as well. As over decades and stuff, we've become so used to seeing especially with things like Friday the 13th, all these sort of horror films, as them to be sort of scary looking and acting in a strange manner. But in reality, that's not the case at all. And, we've become, we've kind of grown on from that now. So we're kind of sort of realizing that, we may walk past someone that is a serial killer, and we would, obviously it's very rare, but we wouldn't know who they are. And I think whilst that is really scary to think about, it's sort of, deterred us from looking at maybe more people that look a bit different, because that's what sort of horror films and these sensationalized. At the end of the day, obviously, these sort of horror films specifically, they're designed to scare. They're designed for entertainment, to scare you. They're not there as a sort of reflection of reality, like true crime documentaries are. So we have sort of thankfully sort of seen that, people that may look a bit different in society are not, not scary people. So yeah, I'm so glad we've moved on from that. I actually I think one of my pieces at university was the role of the media and how it sort of negatively looked at, sort of 20 odd years ago, as the role of, mental illness, as people being, angry and violent, when in actual fact, people with, mental illness are more likely to be the victims of crime. So I'm so glad we've kind of moved on from that way of thinking. We've still got a long way to go. There are, it's still natural, as it's been, in the media for so long. But I'm so glad we're starting to sort of move on from that, because the stigmatization and things are not nice, for people. So yeah.
Yeah. Can we now? I would like to discuss more about your interest or benefit from your knowledge. So, can you tell us maybe what specific areas of true crime interest you and why? Such as what type of killers, murderers, or what you like?
My main interest is why women kill. That's something that I've been interested in for a long time. Women are seen as caregivers. They're seen as, maternal, but yet they can actually be some of the world's most, depraved killers. And I think that for me is really interesting to read how calculated and manipulative some women can be. I've read cases where women have, killed their partners for money. Women, horrifically have killed their children. Women have killed their best friends, whether it's from jealousy to money. Why women kill is generally something that fascinates me in a way, because as a society, we just don't expect women to be able to be so brutal. Especially, I've looked a lot of, I think at one period in my blog, I sort of wrote about every sort of woman that's on death row. And some of the crimes are absolutely horrendous. Just absolutely shocking that a woman can be capable of such sheer, like sadistic acts.
And can you spot, or are there some recurring themes between people or women who do this?
Yeah, so in the cases that I've read, there's definitely money. sort of a financial benefit,
Hmm.
killing their partners for life insurance, for property, that sort of thing. That's definitely a recurring theme. And also jealousy. Jealousy is huge, whether they're jealous because their partner's got a lot of attention, or whether they're jealous because their partner wants a divorce. I've read a horrific case in the States where a woman was so they were, I think, her and a partner going through a divorce. She killed her children, like absolutely horrendous sort of. Okay, there's such a broad sort of why women do kill, but
Mm.
it's just absolutely shocking. And some of the cases I read of women still sort of shock me today, really.
Yeah, yeah. I cannot imagine. Sometimes when I read something similar, I cannot believe it either. I don't know what to say. And are there some specific examples that surprised you? Maybe not how brutal it was, but for some reason that is worth mentioning. Maybe something you couldn't believe, or something just unique to share.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at cases, I've been reading true crime for nearly a decade now, so you know there's still cases that still shock me today. You would think someone that's read true crime for so long, you don't ever become desensitized to it. There's always a case that's like, this is absolutely horrific. We are still humans. We still we still have feelings. We still have emotions. I think one of the most shocking cases, I think, there's so many to choose from. I think it would have to be the Ken and Barbie killers for me. She was a woman in Canada with her partner, and they killed three girls. But one of them was Carla, her name Carla Homolka, and her partner Bernardo. That they were the Ken and Barbie killers. They killed her younger sister, and they lured her into a trap. And she died of they say she died of a accidental overdose because they did drug her. But so it wasn't. They didn't I guess you could say they didn't technically murder, but she, if they didn't drug her, she wouldn't. They didn't get her any help, basically. So she was left, and they did all sorts of horrible things to her and stuff. And I'm just like, I think that really got me. Obviously all the victims were horrendous, but to do that to your own sister as well, and yeah, and then go on to do it to other sort of teenagers her age. It just absolutely horrendous. The fact that it was a man and a woman, and just the whole overall
Hmm.
case in general, like after the murders and the trial and stuff, how she, made a plea bargain before they found the horrific tapes that show that she was complicit, and she only served 12 years. He's obviously, in prison for life. The male killer's in prison for life now, but how she essentially only did such a short time for such horrific, horrific crime still baffles me today.
And sorry, what was the reason behind it? Why did they do it?
Well, I don't necessarily. I mean, I've read a few books on the case. I don't know if maybe she was jealous because her husband was attracted to her younger sister. That they believe that might be one of
Mhm.
the reasons why um, she maybe lured her. That was one that I've read on. But yeah, I mean, some of these it's just so hard to sort of be like, what goes through someone's mind to do that to anyone, let alone your relative. It's just
Mhm.
really it's hard to get your head around. Even I've read on this case for like 10 years, and even today I'm just like, it's sickening.
Mhm. Yeah. And does that happen that you find a case and maybe you cannot find enough of information, or the information you find doesn't satisfy your curiosity? So, you end up being like, oh, how did this end up? How did it, what happened
Yeah, that's
afterwards?
happened. Yeah, that's definitely happened in my blog writing and my regular writing. I was writing a podcast for UK True Crime about the murder of Eve Howard. Eve Howard, I can't remember her name, but that was the case I was writing about. And she was killed by her two children, but they believed that the husband sort of manipulated them into doing it. And I couldn't find much on that up. I mean, I got basics of their upbringing, but I couldn't find a lot of detail. So it made the writing a bit like, how do I, I've got to do 3,000 words. There's loads on the crime, loads on the sentencing, but there's nothing really much on the upbringing. And I sort of have to really do a deep dive. And, for me, what I find is if, there isn't a lot of information, obviously I let the podcast know, I let my people that I'm writing for know, there wasn't a lot, but, I've maybe looked at maybe a theory or something. So a lot of the time I've sort of added things like statistics, which relate to the case. I think, for example, I was writing a script about, I think one of them I was writing about sort of murder of a partner. And I looked at statistics of domestic violence in the UK, how, what the percentages are, I sort of I always make it work. I always make my scripts work. I just always find other sort of facts and figures that can sort of make a whole story. Because obviously you've got the element of the crime, you've got all of that. But for me personally, I find it interesting in looking at sort of statistics and potential reasons, and could this murder have been could this horrific crime been avoided? So yeah, I always try and find ways to still do. If I find a case that I still want to write about the case. I just find other ways to sort of present it.
Yeah, I had this question. It's probably a bit related to what you just said. It may sound a bit, Hollywood-like, or I don't know. But for example, if you are researching something or diving into a specific case, did it happen that you came up with a theory in your mind or some facts or evidence that could help, and try to reach out to someone to say that, oh, maybe you forgot about this, or what about this? Did something like that ever happen?
Yeah, so like when I research, if I'm researching a case and I'm looking at it, I was like, oh my God, this sounds familiar, or this sounds like something else I've read before, or this sounds like maybe it would match to the statistic. That actually helps with what you said about, maybe not finding enough information. So I always I try and link, I do try and link. So there is, for example, with that case that I struggled with the mother being murdered, I try to look at other sort of cases that were similar. It's all trying to link it all together. I mean, obviously, not all crimes are the same, so it is very hard to sort of directly link things. But if there's some similarities, which I do find in some cases of my research there are, I do try and refer back or make reference to, or which potentially could lead to another script, another episode, another article. So it keeps like an interest in the case.
Yeah, maybe in the future you help them to kind of solve the case. There's something unresolved. Thanks to your information and knowledge, that will be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously with unsolved murders, there's so many unsolved murders, and I like to be able to sort of maybe a couple of times a week, show those on missing people. It's a shame because there's so many missing people, around. It's a shame it's not like newspapers and articles cover so much true crime now. Maybe some of these big sort of papers should maybe dedicate a page or something a week to missing cases or unsolved murders and stuff, because there are so many, and a lot of people don't know about. There's a lot of unsolved murders that I didn't know about, and they all deserve justice. Their family deserve justice as well. So I know we have a big interest in true crime, especially the media, but it would be nice for them to do even more about those that are missing and haven't been solved yet.
Yeah. And as we discussed before, a bit of statistics. Can you share some more, either like recurring themes or statistics? For example, if there are certain places where crimes happen when it comes to, I don't know, countries or something, or, these interesting things.
Yeah, so obviously when I was doing my undergrad dissertation, I did it on school shootings, and horrific crimes, and they have happened. Germany have had a lot of school shootings. Brazil, Mexico, Russia. They've happened around the world, but it's very prominent in the United States. And what I found really
Hmm.
interesting was, why is it such a big thing? I mean, obviously, there's the topic of gun control, which obviously is the big one. There's guns are more easily accessible than to other countries. But what I found interesting was looking at other issues of sort of like mental illness. When I was looking, and a lot of the boys, predominantly young men, are school shooters in the States, and seeing that some of them actually had sort of like um, they had some sort of underlying, whether it was undiagnosed or not, mental illness seemed to be quite a common theme. And when I was looking, one of the articles I was reading, that in the United States, it's so expensive to see a psychiatrist. It's very expensive. There was maybe not enough psychiatrists sort of like for people at school to talk to. So it was really interesting. And then reading about, were they influenced by video games? Were they influenced, how were they victims of
Yeah.
bullying? Like, so much. And it was interesting to see, I mean, the statistics, there was when I was looking at weather bullying, and they said statistics that well over 70% of students in the United States have been bullied, but the percentage for school shooters is minimal in comparison. So obviously that is not a direct factor at all. Maybe some of the shooters were bullied at some point, but there is no direct link at all. There's no direct link between violent video games. Yes, again, like some of these shooters played violent video games, but there was no direct link at all. Yeah, what I found interesting when I was doing that study is they found that nowadays a lot of women play video games. Quite a not around just under half women now play video games, but women school shooters are extremely rare. So reading these statistics, whilst they give you some answers, they also raise more questions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and can you see that over time it's perhaps getting better or worse, or it's still kind of the same?
I mean, obviously it's very difficult because we don't, obviously in the UK, we don't get as much news from the States over here. So a lot of times we sort of don't hear about, so we only sort of hear about when school shootings that are horrific, that have many victims. We hear about those, we don't hear about the other ones that, maybe a guy walked into a school and there were no victims. There were injuries, but no victims. So in the sense of anyone had died. So, I mean, it's hard to sort of see from maybe my perspective, but there definitely seems to be, it doesn't seem to be getting any better. It potentially looks like it is. And whereas, I mean, maybe not so much school shootings, mass shootings in general, so sort of whether it's the workplace. But yeah, I mean, they are just horrific crimes that, I mean, we've had a few shootings here, the one in Plymouth a couple of years ago, where Jake Davison? Jake Davison, I can't remember his surname, but he, went on a spree and he killed a few people before taking his own life. That was horrific, absolutely horrendous. But over here, they are extremely rare. So, what got me is these crimes, whether they are, in the States or abroad, they still affect the community. They still affect everyone. They still have a horrifying effect that will impact people in the area more wider for decades to come. And it will make people, even more so, especially when they do take their own lives, as why did they do this? Looking at reasons why, trying to make these horrific events not happen again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's actually a very unfortunate coincidence, but where I'm from, Czech Republic, we had a shooting in December.
Yes, I saw in the
It's
news.
pretty much a month ago.
The university,
It was terrible. Yeah, because you would never expect that would happen in such a safe country and safe city. I would say that it happens mostly just in the US, and then this happened. I was terrible. I don't even know what to say about it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely. I mean, I remember
Very
hearing that on the news.
disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we don't, like you said, we don't expect them. We don't expect them in Europe anywhere near the extent that, these people suffer in the United States. But, they do happen. I think that's the thing, because they are so rare here. When they do happen, it's like, oh my God, like, and whereas you see, if you seen when you see in the news in the States, if another horrific school shooting or a mass shooting happens, it always brings up the arguments of guns. Whereas in the UK, it's like
Hmm.
because we don't have them at anywhere near the same rate, the reaction is very different to what it is in the States. Obviously they're shocked and of
Hmm.
course devastated, but there's so many questions and people wanting answers. Whereas here, about gun control, whereas here it's like, this is horrendous. We have strict gun laws. There is gun control, but yet these incidents, it's like we're lost for words because we just don't expect them.
Hmm. Yeah, I can agree. And was there, or did you ever find some kind of crime or incident that happened near to your place?
Yeah, so actually, where my mum lived, in Colchester in Essex, we had a teenager, a 15-year-old boy, James Fairweather, his name was. He killed two people. And this is what makes this case very odd, because he didn't have a specific modus operandi, he didn't have a specific MO. His first victim he killed in a popular park in the evening. And this man was stabbed hundreds of times, like horrendous, and they couldn't find the killer because it was such a frenzied attack. They couldn't find him, and the killer didn't strike again. I think that's about a year or so later, or a while later. And then a woman walking to university was killed, ambushed in a horrific sort of manner, multiple stab wounds. And again, they didn't know who the killer was, and the victims were so very different. They I can't remember if they linked them first straight away, but they couldn't work out, these are two horrendous crimes. And then I believe he was eventually caught because a woman was walking her dog and she saw someone sort of lurking in the bushes. And it turned out to be the killer. He was lurking in the bushes, he was arrested. And the scariest thing was he was actually interviewed, I believe, after the first murder, because they were interviewing loads of people with sort of like previous sort of convictions or charges. And that was really scary, because I remember on the news there was articles like, is there a serial killer, like, and he killed two victims now. They were all very different, but the only common denominator, whereas I think the guy that he killed, he had a disability, I believe, and the second was a woman much smaller. So the only sort of common denominator is that they were essentially a lot weaker to the killer, um, and that was the only sort of common variable between the both. But it was very scary because you didn't know who he was going to go for next. Whereas down the road in Ipswich, many years ago, they had the Suffolk Strangler, and he was targeting sex workers that were working in the red light district in Portman Road. And the police knew that they were looking for someone who was targeting solely sex workers, and it was a horrible time for the women over there. And whereas the police sort of in Colchester were, they didn't know who they were looking for because they were targeting anyone.
Hmm. Yeah, I was just sorry, trying to imagine it. It sounds terrible, especially when it happens so close to where you are from or the people you know are from.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was quite. It was definitely quite a scary one. I mean, for people that maybe went out and sort of people that, like the woman that found sort of the killer, walking their dogs, more quieter areas, because
Hmm.
we didn't really know who he looked like. We knew it was a male, but we didn't know that. I mean, he was about 15, but he was only a teenager, so we didn't know really that he was that young. No one really knew as a male, but we didn't really know what he looked like. So that was what was scary.
And sorry, did maybe you said it, but did they find out in the end what was his motive? Why did he do that?
Um, I I'm not quite sure. I mean, I know he got sort of. I'm pretty sure he got a life sentence. But they found out he was very
Mm.
obsessed. He read lots of serial killer books. He was sort of very obsessed with murder. I know they found a load of books at his home. Um, But yeah, it was. I think I'm presuming if I remember rightly that was his aim, to be a serial killer. I believe if I remember rightly. But yeah, that was quite scary. They found a whole load of sort of like true crime sort of
Hmm.
books, things like that, in his room.
Yeah, yeah. And something I'm also curious about, can we discuss films and documentaries a bit? What are maybe your favorite ones and why?
In films in general, or true crime related ones, or anything.
When it comes to crime related ones.
Oh, okay. I think when it comes to TV shows, documentaries, I'm a massive fan of anything on Discovery Plus. I find Discovery Plus is quite underrated when it comes to other streaming networks, but they have the best range of documentaries. You've got serial killers, you've got women that kill, you've got all different types of crimes. There's so many. I think I've watched a couple. The case of Jodi Arias, who killed her ex-boyfriend. I've watched that one several times on Discovery Plus. Really interested in the way they do them very sensitively as well. So literally, I can't pick a favorite because there's so many on Discovery Plus that I enjoy. When it comes to films, I think one of the ones that I remember the most is probably true crime related, probably Monster with Charlize Theron playing Eileen Wuornos.
Oh yeah, didn't she win
Yes,
Oscar for that?
yes,
Oh
she won.
yeah, I
She
saw
won
that.
that
Oh
one.
my god.
Yes, that was. I think.
I saw the transformation, what she looked
Yeah,
like there versus real. Oh my
yeah.
god,
I mean,
it's unbelievable. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I read the book. I watched the film. I've read a few things on Eileen Wuornos, and to me, I thought it was. I thought it was really well done. It is.
Hmm.
Obviously, it's quite difficult to get exact details. I mean, the name, obviously, Christina Ricci's name, the character she played wasn't the real name of her girlfriend, so they changed the name, little things like that. But yeah,
Oh, I didn't know.
it was. I'm not. I can't remember. I'm not. I can't remember why they did that. I'm not too sure, but I know they changed names, things like that. But I think it was. I think it was very well done. I mean, I've been to Los Angeles a few times, and I did actually remember seeing in sort of the Hollywood and Highland Mall, they've actually got carved into the walls like different winners, and I remember seeing Charlie's Theron and Monster being up there.
Yeah, I can recommend the film as well. It was a good one. And what do you think about those either TV series or documentaries on Netflix? Do you find them generally well done, or
Um,
it really depends?
I mean, yeah, it does really depend. I think some are good, some are very sensationalized. I think I do like them, I do
Mm.
watch them, but I think Netflix, it does get so much attention, and rightly so. The other documentaries are good, but I feel like, other places like Discovery Plus have been doing crime documentaries for so long, they don't get the same sort of attention. I don't think it's because maybe many people don't know about it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, they're good. I've seen a fair few good ones on Netflix. I watched, I think recently the I'm a Stalker one on Netflix. Different
Hmm.
cases of people that have been convicted of sort. That's quite chilling, actually, quite scary. I've watched a couple of those. That's a newer one. But yeah, I do watch them, and I do sometimes enjoy them, but I always like to stick to Discovery Plus. I think when it comes to crime, for me, it's such a range, diverse range.
Hmm. Yeah, I feel like there is almost always something new. It might be hard to keep up with all the content that they keep
Definitely, like
releasing.
every channel, whether it's ITVX, Channel 5, Channel 4, and then Sky now have a Sky Crime channel. So there's
Mhm.
so much content out there now, and so many different ways of watching it as well. YouTube, TikTok, play the
Mm.
podcast as well. So there's so many ways to sort of listen or watch true crime content now than there was, I don't know, like maybe five,
Mhm.
6 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And to discuss something a bit more positive, what are your favorite films or TV series outside of crime?
Ooh. I quite like sort of the old sort of geeky classics. Like I love Terminator, I love Star Wars, I love Alien, all sort of
Mhm.
films like that. TV series.
Mhm.
Oh, I like Lost, Big Bang Theory. I mean, Big Bang Theory usually is my background,
Oh,
but
okay.
sometimes if I'm working on like a really horrible crime, like something really horrendous, it's nice to have something sort of light to finish with or to watch after
Yeah,
something.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I love all sorts of those sort of old school sort of sci-fi type things.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. Sounds good. Um, we have 10 minutes left, so is there something that I should have asked you and did not, or something that you would like to share?
No, I think you covered everything, loads of different aspects. I think for me, the thing that I'd love to share is obviously the thing with writing is that, I would always say when people ask me about my university experience, it was amazing, absolutely loved it. And if people say, would they recommend going to university? I would always say if you want to go for it, from my experience, it was amazing. But I also want to point out that, university isn't everything. Um, you know, especially for things like writing. Writing is a skill that, with time and consistency, it will get better. And if you don't want to go down the university route, that's perfectly fine. I mean, I was approached to do scripts from my blog. Um, so, it's up to you whether you want to take that path. But for me, it would be, if you love doing it, especially love writing and you're passionate about writing, keep it going. Whether it remains a hobby or it's something you can make a job and a career out of. I think you should still do it regardless because your writing will only get better when you practice it more and you
Hmm.
write more. Um, so yeah, that would be one thing that I would say is, when it comes to writing, you should never give up because writing does only get better with the practice that you put in. And I think,
Hmm.
I think one of my biggest goals now is to expand my, my clients as such. I want to be able to write for more scripts, write more articles. Maybe, I've seen in the papers online, they sort of randomly, whether it's the Daily Mirror or the Sun, they normally sort of cover random true crime cases that I wouldn't really expect them to cover. So I'd love to be able to maybe do some input for them, maybe sort of encourage more true crime writing. And I think one of my other biggest goals, I would say, is I mentioned I've been to Los Angeles a few times, and this was before I was interested in true crime, just for like holidays and stuff. And California in itself, such a true crime history from the Manson murders, Splat Dahlia, like so many different cases, serial killers, all different types of crimes. And I'd love to be able to sort of go back, like a kind of writer's retreat, research.
Hmm.
I think that would be my biggest goal, and be able to come back with lots of information, enhance my blog a bit,
Hmm.
maybe give some ideas. So, yeah, I think those would be my biggest goals. And I think my words for anyone, especially someone that is neurodivergent, is that, we can do anything. We can do anything anyone else can. And if we're good at something, we should put all our best efforts into doing it because, we are creative people. Neurodivergent people are very creative. And yeah, we shouldn't give up or have, worry about, whether this will affect my career. It won't. Keep being yourself. That's the most important message.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. And would you be also interested in writing like scripts for these TV series or films even?
Oh, definitely. I definitely. I mean, I would love to be able to do some research for documentaries. I love to be brought on because obviously when they do these, obviously you've got the camera crew and all the interviewers and stuff. They're doing their thing. They obviously need someone to gather the research. Reach out to maybe some of the relatives, and I'd love to be able to do that, to get involved in that. I love working on podcasts as well, and it would also be nice to work on an actual like series, because I can imagine it's very different
Mhm.
to the way research is doing a podcast. So it'd be nice to sort of have that experience as well, because it's all experience at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's definitely good to try something new, because you may find out that there is something new that interests you, or you may
Yeah,
get new
definitely.
experience, meet new people. You never know.
Definitely, it'll be able to.
And are there any?
I was just saying, it's a way to sort of branch out. So for me, for example, I do true podcast writing. I do article writing. It would be then nice to add sort of research for TV into my CV as well.
Mhm. Yeah, I was just gonna ask you if there are any upcoming projects, whether, I don't know, books, articles, films, that you are excited about.
Yeah, I mean, I've just finished a script for a murder in Manchester at the moment. So that should hopefully be on the podcast soon. Like I said, I've got I'm going to be a little guest in an American podcast tomorrow. I'm talking about, having a chat about UK crime, things like that. And then, so yeah, I've got a few things lined up that I'm looking forward to. So yeah, I think that's it. And hopefully, February is a new month coming soon. So hopefully there'll be a lot more projects, more scripts that I can write.
Mm-hmm. Yep, fingers crossed. So can you summarize, I know we talked about it, but can you summarize where people can follow you and other projects that you worked on and people can check out?
Okay, so yeah, so you can follow me on Instagram. My true crime blog is Mega Christie. That's my main sort of, place you see on my work, all my cases that I've sort of read about and covered. I'm always welcome to people to message me to ask for, what sort of crime documentaries are good to watch, podcasts to listen to, etc. So obviously I don't perform the podcast, I just write them. So I've written a few for UK True Crime. So I'm happy to sort of, if people want to know, I'm happy to sort of send them the link. So I've done a few cases for them. So I'm always happy to send the links because I've done quite a few. But yeah, I'm easily approachable to talk about. I love to talk about true crime, so my inbox is always open for whether it's opportunities, whether it's chats about true crime.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is awesome. I will get the links and add them to the show notes so that people can have a look.
Awesome, thank you.
And I think we can finish up then. Want to say thank you very much. It was awesome. I really enjoyed this discussion, and it's just a very interesting topic. So I'm glad that you could join us so that we can explore this and hopefully educate listeners more in this area.
Awesome. Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, it's definitely a different topic to discuss, but it's been interesting to talk about. It's my first podcast as well, so I was really nervous about it. I didn't really know what to say. I read through the script, I was like, but yeah, no, it was really enjoyable. And again, thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app, get in touch to provide your feedback, or share any ideas for future guests. Thank you, and see you soon.